Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our Talks with Walt, as we are calling our readings through the deathbed edition of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. We are ending now the first annex set of poems, Stanza 70, and we turn now to Now Precedent Songs, Farewell, poem 55 of the 58 of Stanza 70. And it's a fascinating poem because if ever we could ask Whitman at the end of his life, what are your favorite offerings in all of Leaves of Grass? You know, if we were interviewing him today in our Talks with Walt, surely some of you would say, hey, of all the poems you ever wrote, which are the ones that you really were moved most by? Which ones do you think has the longevity to last? It would be a fascinating question to ask him. And the only place where we'll get an answer possibly to that question is in this poem itself. Now, we are assuming that you've been with us at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side, Talks with Walt, our playlist. And we have given a set of introductory comments to Stanza at 70 I'm hopeful that you're familiar with. And it's fascinating that this poem will follow the one we just did, Dismantled Ship. Now, our Nortons will tell us that Whitman's own note at the foot of the page is a clear record of the composition of this and the following poem. Trubel discusses the circumstances which did not warrant more than a casual choice of the poems cited. Casual meaning, well, maybe it's not obviously the list that we would maybe expect in terms of the definitive list of these are the poems that most I'm proud of. By the way, Farewell will take us here to this idea of The Long Goodbye. The last poem in actually the deathbed edition of Leaves of Grass will come to mind as well. He'll say it this way: Now, preceding songs, farewell. In other words, all that I've done. By every name, farewell. We would say title today. And then, in parenthetics, trains of a staggering line, in many a strange procession, wagons from ups and downs with intervals, from elder years, mid-age, or youth, in parenthetic. In other words, because Whitman devoted so much of his life to these poems, now that he's ending his life, he looks back and he kind of starts to see a little bit of a pattern, but it's not really clear to him. But he knows that he's covered a lot of territory. And now all of a sudden, interestingly, he'll give us 14 poems. Now, because you've been reading with me from the very first word, come, that introductory word, the very first word of Leaves of Grass as the early lines, and then of course the very first poem and on, it'll be fascinating to see which one of these poems he now lists. Again, some will argue it's just kind of a casual throwaway. I think Whitman himself probably loved the memory of a number of these poems. It's as much an interesting list for what's missing as opposed to what's there. He'll begin with now these 14 poems: In Cabin Ships, or The Old Cause, or Poets to Come, or Paumanok. We'll remember these inscription poems. Song of Myself, we would expect him to have that one listed. Calamus or Adam, that is to say, that would not shock us. Those collections are there. Or Beat Beat Drums, or To the Leavened Soil They Trod, or Captain My Captain. It's interesting he would put that one there, given that he himself said several times that he didn't really embrace this poem as much as the public did, always considered it his favorite. Cosmos is here next. Quicksand Years or Thoughts, Thou Mother with Thy Equal Brood. That's it. That's his list of the 14 poems. And many, many more unspecified from Fiber, Heart of Mine. Notice Leaves of Grass and Fiber and Growth. From Throat and Tongue, we know how those two words have been used in Leaves of Grass, taking us, of course, back to Song of Myself, passages 3, 4, 5. My Life's Hot Pulsing Blood. It is interesting. I almost use some sexual language here. The Personal Urge and Form for Me. Not merely paper, automatic type, and ink. In other words, there's more to Leaves of Grass than simply the words themselves on the page. Each song of mine, each utterance in the past, having its long, long history. So in other words, he stacks it, right? Of life or death or soldier's wound. Every time that Whitman becomes nostalgic, he always comes back to the wound dresser. He always comes back to his work as a nurse in the war. Of country's loss or safety, that's what the war was for him, right? It was an experiment to see. That's what Lincoln called it in the Gettysburg Address, didn't he? Whether that nation or any nation so conceived can long endure. Oh heaven, Notice your 4 exclamation points to finish, now in parenthetics. Almost like an aside. It's almost like, man, I can't believe I wrote that many poems. And for those of us who are reading these poems from the very beginning, we kind of now stop and we go, wow, I can't believe that I've read so many lines of Whitman's poetry. It's quite remarkable. Oh, heaven, what flash and started endless train of all, compared indeed to that, what wretched shred even at the best of all. It's interesting that he'll use the word wretched, maybe fatiguing here, and then shred is used in As I Ebbed with the Ocean of Life 13, or number 3, you'll remember. At the best of all, and all is the final word with the exclamation point to follow. Well, what is the 2A message here? I think artistic creation is often extremely personal, and for Whitman now, this has become personal. At 2B, well, the list is interesting, but what's not in the list is even more interesting. Where's Brooklyn Ferry? Where's Open Road? Where's Lilacs? He mentions Captain, but not Lilacs. Where's Passage to India, and on we could go. I mean, Out of the Cradle, Endlessly Rocking. It kind of makes you begin to think about at 3B, what is your favorite list? But before we go there, think about 3A. I love Emily Dickinson's This Is My Letter to the World That Never Wrote to Me. You'll remember she says, judge tenderly of me. And there may be some of that spirit here in a poem like this as well. And of course, we're going to think about the final poem of Leaves of Grass, Goodbye My Fancy. We are now 34 poems away from that experience, so it will make some sense to already begin to get ready for that reading. Finally, at 3B, what do you think it is, the poem already, that you believe would make that list of the top, here it's 14, but for sure we would say the top 5 poems of Leaves of Grass? And what about artistic creation for you yourself? Do you think that at the end you will have an artistic creation that you will be most proud of? And if so, how will you qualify that? I mean, reading Leaves of Grass may be one of those accomplishments for you that you'll remember later in your life. I hope so. Thank you.